The world sees a political crisis in Iran's nuclear ambitions, even if the current ceasefire actually holds. However, to truly probe beneath the surface, we need to look through three different lenses. One as a physicist, historian, and Jewish mystic. As an Orthodox Jewish astrophysicist, I'm going to do something no one else has, deeply connecting the nuclear physics of critical mass to an ancient biblical rebellion, and I will show how both are repeating themselves in today's headline. First, we'll apply the historian's lens to analyze a 3,300-year-old data set. Then, we'll use the lens of a physicist to understand the high-stakes geopolitical nuclear game theory being played. And finally, we'll apply the lens of the Jewish mystic to reveal the ultimate spiritual strategy behind it all. The culmination of this analysis, by the end of this video, will clearly put the pieces together in a way you will not find anywhere else on YouTube. To understand the present, we need to first analyze the data of the past. Let's begin with our first lens, that of the historian. The relationship between the Jewish people and the nation of Persia is a fascinating data set, showing a complex oscillating pattern of behavior over millennia. It's a tale of two opposite faces, where the frequency of change has become more volatile as we edge closer to the present. The story begins on a remarkable high note. The first face of Persia is that of a savior. In 539 BCE, King Cyrus the Great conquered the Babylonian Empire. But this wasn't just another brutal conquest. His policy, recorded on the ancient clay artifact known as the Cyrus Cylinder, is considered by many historians to be the world's first charter of human rights. It established a revolutionary new model of empire based on tolerance and respect for local customs and religions. A stark contrast to the brutal policies of the emperors before him. And a primary example of this policy was his decree ending the 70-year Babylonian exile for the Jewish people. He authorized our return to Judah and even funded the construction of our second Holy Temple in Jerusalem. This act was so significant that Cyrus is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible in glowing terms throughout the books of Isaiah, Ezra, and Daniel, where he is even described as an agent of God. But this deep connection of the benevolent relationship was not the only historical pattern between the Jews and the Persians. This delicate situation was almost shattered just a few generations later, revealing the second terrifying face of ancient Iran. In the story of Purim, set in the Persian capital of Shushan, the king's viceroy, Haman, plotted the first recorded attempt at a full-blown Holocaust, the annihilation of every single Jewish man, woman, and child in the entire empire. After the era of ancient Persia, the center of Jewish life, intellectually, culturally, and financially, was not in Israel, but in Baghdad, right in the heart of the Islamic Caliphate. The greatest Jewish sages led the academies of Sura and Pumbedita for almost 1,000 years, where they codified one of the most important scholarly works that helped maintain the Jewish people's existence even until today, and that is the Babylonian Talmud. Yet, despite this golden era, the relationship was different again, a complex game of coexistence. The Jewish community was led by the Exalach, a descendant of King David, who represented the people to the ruling caliphs. Under a legal structure known as dhimmi status, the Jewish people were granted protection and the right to practice Judaism in exchange for paying a discriminatory tax and accepting a subordinate role in society. This long historical data set, swinging from savior to existential threat to complex subordinate, brings us to the modern era. We saw the friendly, cooperative face of Persia again under the last Shah. However, the 1979 Islamic Revolution reawakened the second Haman-like face, driven by a hard-line Shia theology that believes that their messianic figure, the 12th Imam Muhammad al-Mahdi, can only return after a period of global chaos, where they believe that a final confrontation with Israel is a religious necessity. While this historical data reveals a clear, oscillating pattern of behavior as both savior and existential threat, in order to truly understand the high-stakes mechanics of this modern conflict between Iran and the West, we first need to put on our physicist lens and understand the science that changed the world: nuclear physics. The immense power of a nuclear weapon starts from a process called enrichment. Naturally found uranium is over 99% stable U-238. However, mixed within it is a tiny fraction, less than 1%, of a slightly lighter, higher volatile isotope, U-235. That is the key. The difficult and dangerous process of enrichment is the art of separating and concentrating this U-235. Think of it like this. For a peaceful nuclear power plant, you only need your fuel to be about 3 to 5% enriched. But to create the conditions just right for producing a weapon that can bring a nation to its knees, quantum physics demands a concentration of 90%. When you gather enough of this weapons-grade material, you cross a critical mass. At that point, the system becomes fundamentally unstable. A single neutron can then initiate an uncontrollable, devastating chain reaction. This was the power that Iran was pursuing. Now we can see a glaring inconsistency in Iran's official story. Why would a nation sitting on the world's fourth largest oil reserve invest billions in a peaceful nuclear energy program that requires only 5% enrichment when all of their actions point towards achieving the 90% threshold? The data suggests that the game being played is not about energy. To understand the strategy, we must turn to game theory. This area of academic study was popularized in the movie A Beautiful Mind, featuring the dramatized story of Professor John Nash. The hardline Iranian regime is playing a zero-sum game. Their desired payoff is not economic prosperity. It is the fulfillment of a theological belief that global chaos, precipitated by a conflict with the Jewish nation, is required to hasten the coming of their Messiah, the Mahdi. They believe that they can only win if Israel loses. And this is critical for understanding the breaking news. As I'm filming this, we're hearing reports of a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Iran, brokered by President Trump. A casual viewer may see this and think, great, the conflict is ending. But a game theorist sees it very differently. When you know your opponent is playing a zero-sum game, you understand that a ceasefire is not an end to the conflict. It is simply a strategic pause. It's a move in the game designed to allow them to regroup, rearm, and continue their attack at a later, more advantageous date. It is a temporary truce in a permanent, biblically foretold war that ends in the coming of our righteous Messiah. Understanding this point is critical for anyone who debates these issues. When you're in a discussion, the key is to identify what game the other side is playing. If you assume that they want a win-win outcome when they're acting out on a win-lose strategy, your arguments will never connect. In any clash, players have strategies to achieve a desired payoff. In a non-zero-sum game, both players can win together. This was the game that Korach played in Baghdad. Cooperation for mutual benefit. But the Iranian regime is playing the zero-sum game. They believe they can only achieve their theological goals if the other side, Israel, is eliminated. This forces other world powers into a complex, multi-layered game of their own. The strategy we saw from leaders like President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu had to be one of calculated deception. The public face of diplomacy and sanctions was a necessary move to manage Iran's powerful allies like China, Russia, and North Korea. It created a fog of uncertainty, masking other potential, more decisive actions. That decisive action requires a specific tool for a specific problem. To neutralize a deeply buried, fortified target like the Fordow facility, one needs a weapon like the 30,000-pound GPU-57 bunker buster, delivered by an aircraft that cannot be seen, the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. The quality of stealth is the key variable that changes the entire strategic calculation, not just the military use. but also when hiding information in high-stakes, multifaceted global negotiations. So, we have a modern game board, the players, and the high-stakes physics of the weapons. We have a clear understanding of the what and the how. But to truly decode the strategy, we have to understand the why. We need the original rulebook. For that, we must apply our third and final lens, that of the Jewish mystic, and a look at a blueprint written thousands of years ago. The book of Ezekiel, written 2,600 years ago, specifically names Persia as a key player in the final end of days war. And the Talmudic sages elaborate on this prophetic trajectory. In a fascinating discussion in Tractate Yoma, they hold a crucial debate about the ultimate fate of Persia and its primary rival, the West, which they call Rome, or Edom in Hebrew. The debate presents two possibilities. One view, from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, argues that Rome is destined to fall to Persia based on a sharp logical inference from history. But the opposite opinion, stated by Rav, is that Persia will ultimately fall to Rome. When his students questioned this, Rav answered that it is a royal decree, a divine plan that may be beyond simple human logic. The key takeaway for us is the fact that the sages saw Persia as a nation so significant that it would endure and challenge the West until the final act of history. Additionally, the Yalkut Shimoni presents a powerful and specific vision of Persia as a central and aggressive actor in the final drama of the world, whose actions will precipitate a period of immense global turmoil that will, in turn, lead directly to the Messianic redemption. The details are far beyond the scope of this video, but those who want to learn more can explore Yeshayahu Remez's tough tzadi test. This isn't the first time that the sages correctly predicted a world event of this magnitude. In Tractate Megillah, they also warned of Germania of Edom, identified as Germany, saying that if they are not held in check, they will go forth and destroy the entire world. This prophetic blueprint brings us back to this week's Torah Parsha. His rebellion wasn't just a political dispute. It was a spiritual chain reaction reminiscent of a zero-sum game. The critical mass we discussed in nuclear physics has a direct parallel in the spiritual world. By isolating a faction and enriching it with pure argument and negativity, Korach created a spiritual critical mass that erupted with a destructive, rebellious fire. Khamenei's modern pursuit of nuclear weapons is the physical manifestation of the same spiritual principle. And the end of Korach's rebellion is one of the most unique events in the entire Torah. There was no battle, no conventional warfare. The Torah says that the earth itself opened its mouth and swallowed the rebels and all their possessions, neutralizing the rebellion by taking them down deep into the ground. Now, let's look at a modern parallel. Iran builds its most sensitive nuclear facility, Fordow, 300 feet inside of a mountain, believing that it is safe from any conventional attack. And the specific strategy designed to defeat it is the coordinated release of 14 GBU-57 bunker busters, delivered by 7 B-2 stealth bombers, accompanied by 120 additional support aircraft. This weapon doesn't just explode on the surface. It's designed to penetrate deep into the ground before detonating, causing the entire underground facility to implode and in effect be swallowed by the mountain itself. The parallel is stunning and precise. A rebellious faction, fortified deep underground, is ultimately neutralized by the earth itself. Not only is this pattern undeniable, but by divine providence, the attacks happened during the week where we read Parshas, creating a powerful connection to the famous teaching of the Alter Rebbe that we must live with the weekly Torah reading. The final successor of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, often referred to as the Lubavitcher Rebbe, provides the ultimate strategy to influence the fate of nations by involving himself in their deepest roots. He taught that we must not only engage with the world on a physical and political level, as leaders do, but he orchestrated parallel spiritual responses to alter world affairs. He understood from chapter 23 of Tanya that the very life and sustenance of all the worlds is dependent upon the performance of the mitzvahs by the creatures of the lower worlds. Our individual actions create spiritual instruments that influence the constantly evolving geopolitical scene. Our positive deeds, prayer with real intention, giving charity, helping another person put on tefillin, are not just nice rituals. They are the spiritual bunker busters. They are the effects that literally sustain the cosmic order and create a protective shield around the entire world. When we look through all three lenses, the historians, the physicists, and the mystics, the data points to a profound conclusion. The conflicts we see in the news are not random chaos. They are part of an ancient unfolding blueprint. But what does that blueprint look like? And what does the most famous Jewish philosopher, Maimonides, have to say about the nature of the Messianic period? Click here to see an action-packed yet informative view of ancient sources that only a few Orthodox Jewish scholars even know about.